Welcome to Content with Character, the weekly podcast that'll give you the momentum you need to create content with more ease, clarity, and laughter. I'm your host, content copywriter Emily Aborn, and I'm all about unconventional marketing approaches. I believe in your big ideas, and I'm excited to help you share them in a way that's distinctly you. You know what's not distinctly you? All those generic tips and tricks on time management, like make a daily schedule, prioritize, tackle the hard stuff first, set time limits. It's all helpful, yes, and a lot of it works, but sometimes our best efforts, we just can't get it to stick. I think it goes a layer deeper than that, and in this episode, we're going to talk about some time befriendment strategies for you to try for yourself, so you can stop, quote, managing your time and be its best buddy instead. Last weekend, I sat down and did something that I have not done in a long time, probably most of the summer, actually. Want to know what it was? I worked on a weekend. Look, I make the rules here, okay? I can work whenever the heck I want. Don't judge me. Also, I didn't work all weekend, and also, I wasn't doing client work. But that said, I did do a whole lot of work on the weekends. I've actually been trying to not work on the weekends in the summer, or not trying, just I haven't been doing it. But I'll say this, when I went to sleep that night, Sunday night, I mentally went through everything I'd accomplished and I was like, wow, good job, Emily. That was a lot. And you know what? It felt amazing. I am usually a very good time manager. I have a strong grasp on what works for me, what doesn't work for me, as it relates to like my daily routine and setting up a consistent work schedule, being productive, eliminating distractions, yada, yada, yada. But I want to let you know a little secret. So come closer, dear listener. Oh, God, not that close. Jeez. Okay, joking aside. This year, I have kind of failed life as a productivity-focused person for myself. I failed myself. If I'm honest, I've been kind of like letting go for a while now with being productive, and I've been struggling this year a little bit to get back on track, stay on track, and not feel constantly, completely overbooked. I want a business and a life that feels really, really good to me. Like I want to love how I run my business and live my life. I've given away this one resource that I can never get back to a lot of things that didn't deserve it. Obviously, the resource I am discussing is time, my time. And I'm not 100% sure of what caused my slow decline, my demise, but I have some guesses. And this might sound a little ridiculous, but this is honestly when it started. Last November, Jason and I both got sick. Him first, then me. He was down for the count. I was down for the count, and then I ended up then it was Christmas, and then I dislocated 2 ribs because I was coughing so much from being sick, and I ended up having a kind of challenging Christmas. I'm not going to get into the personal details, but it was just a challenging month in my brain, 2 months in my brain. So fast forward to 2023. It was going to be this year where like I reclaimed my time. I was going to be the unicorn of saying no and sticking with my plan. And I planned to like spend the whole year basically like going inward and getting quiet and just shutting my office door and working away the way that I work best. Well, that did not happen. We ended up kicking off the year with 2 funerals, 2 cases of COVID, losing our power like 70 bajillion times, a giant snowstorm I had to handle on my own, and some situations that were just taking up a lot of my head and heart space. Needless to say, my attention and focus were very scattered in so many different directions. It was kind of crazy. So what ended up happening was for months and months and months, I think it was like 3 months, maybe even 4, I was working in pockets and pieces whenever I could just like squeeze this in, squeeze that in, never really able to work in the way that I work best, Emily, which is very long stretches of uninterrupted time. It's just felt really challenging for me this year to stay focused, distraction free, actually achieve what I set out to do in a day or in a week or in a month. And I just feel like things just keep on like pivoting and throwing curveballs at me when I least expect it. It's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. That is life. And I know that. Well, In college, that wasn't life because I had everything under control. Everything was under my control because I was as OCD as they get. But anyway, when you're a proper adult, that is life, right? It throws you curveballs and you do have to pivot. So that said, it's just not felt like a year when I felt like me and time were really on the same page. So on that Sunday, last Sunday, after I spent, I don't know, like 4, 5, it might have even been 6 hours in my office, just in the zone, getting things done, creatively working away, specifically on content creation, I felt so good. I felt so refreshed, so energized, like my old self was back. I even felt revitalized in other areas of my business. Like I felt more excited to work on my client work and more excited to market things just because like I had gotten so much done. It was really incredible. Like productive Emily was back in the saddle. Watch out, world. All my creative cylinders firing. Now, I'm a pretty big believer that, inspiration and momentum begets more inspiration and momentum. Motivation begets more motivation. Passion, excitement, it begets more passion and excitement. You get the idea, but that's kind of what I think happened to me on that Sunday. Like I really said, you know what? I'm going to sit down and do the work, and all of this excitement came from that. So I had to sit back after Sunday and say to myself, okay, what made this different? Like, first of all, I don't usually tend to work on Sundays, but that couldn't be the only thing. Like, there was something different about my actual approach that day. And here's what I observed. Since November, since I kind of went off the rails, I have been desperately trying to reclaim the reins and manage my time. Okay, get a grasp on my time, force things back to the way that I wanted them to be. Instead, on Sunday, time was my friend. Time was on my side. We were BFFs. Now, I wrote an article for Brains Magazine back in 2021 called Don't Manage Your Time, Befriend It. And I'll include that in the show notes. But when I had that epiphany on Sunday, I actually went back and reread the article to prepare for the show to kind of like look at what has changed and also what still applies to befriending our time versus managing our time. So that's where I'm taking you today. That's where the inspiration came from, and that is where we're going. We're going to talk about some time-related concepts for business owners with busy schedules and life stuff going on, but you still need to get stuff done. You still need to get stuff done on a regular basis for your business, for your clients, for your marketing, for your content creation, and for your visibility. Now, I'm going to try to put a lot of this through a content creation and visibility lens. We're going to get into that even more next week. But I want to give you 2 caveats. Caveat number 1, I am not a productivity coach. I do have a lot of ideas. Caveat number 2, highly significant one, I am not a mother. I do not have children. So if you have children, you're going to take some of this in and know that you might need to ignore some of it and add some things of your own. I also do not identify as neurodiverse. And I know that from what I've learned about neurodiversity, that adds on perhaps another layer of challenge when it comes to making time your friend. But I still think that no matter who you are, we all have different things going on in our lives, caretaking, multiple businesses, family, friends, hobbies, activities. So I do think that no matter who you are, there's going to be something in here for you to glean, and then you can just leave the rest for somebody else, okay? Like, don't worry about the stuff that's not for you. No biggie. If this is your first time listening, hello, welcome. I'm Emily Aborn. I'm a content copywriter and podcast host of this show, as well as the She Built This podcast. And as I said, I don't have human kids, but I do have, drumroll please, I am a dog mom of Clyde, the one and only Clyde. I'm also married to my favorite person in the whole world, Jason. And I live in the backwoods of New Hampshire, where I spend lots of time hiking with Jason and Sir Clyde as we investigate fungi in the woods. I also sit on my back porch and read a lot and do crossword puzzles and drink coffee over word games. It's lovely. Idyllic even. Okay, now it's time to sit back and enjoy this little chit chat. Maybe pour yourself a little sip of coffee, if you will, about how to befriend your time. If there is literally just one takeaway I want you to remember, and I want you to just keep this as your little mantra, your time. Your time, listener, your time matters. You don't need me to tell you how important it is, but I want you to know that it is your time that is valuable, okay? It's a very limited resource. Every day we kind of get like this fresh chance of how we want to spend it, use it however we please, hypothetically. But that said, there are, of course, like the necessaries and the have-tos, depending on who we are and what we have happening in our life. My personal goal is to live my life spending more time doing what I want and less time doing what I don't. That's basically the goal of my life. That for me is what it looks like to be friends with, to befriend my time. So I'm going to give you some examples of when I'm not befriending my time. Maybe you'll hear yourself in these too. When our schedules are too packed, they are full of things that we don't even want to be doing in the first place. We're basically at war with our time. When we want to go faster, when we want time to go faster or slower, or like, I wish I wasn't going through this right now. Like, I wish time right now did not exist for me. Then we're kind of like wrestling with our time. When we're constantly wishing we had more of it, we're dueling with our time. When we're trying to find it, and it's like, where is it? We're not in a good place with our time. When we vastly overestimate or underestimate times, tasks, what's on our plate, we're basically arguing with time. And when we are racing from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing, feeling depleted, exhausted, out of breath, frustrated, annoyed, etc., short fused, we are in a state of trying to manage our time. So that's what it looks like to try to manage your time, right? You're kind of like dealing with this like unwieldy, out of control thing that you don't have a good relationship with. When you have a life that's focused on what really matters to you, okay? What really, really is important to you. And when you say yes to those things and you give your time to those things and you do things that matter, that's when you start to befriend your time. Personally, I want time on my side. I want to be best friends with it because when it is, hours feel lighter. They make us feel so good inside when we are like feeling like we're in the flow, right? We're creating things that we want to create. We're impacting people in the way we want to impact. We're spending time with the people we want to spend time with. We just feel like we have enough and we can move through our day with less overwhelm and less pressure. So, how do we do it? How do we actually start to make time our friend instead of our foe? You have may heard this in a number of different ways, but I think first of all, where you need to start is you need to know what you're working with, which is why I like to begin making a list of what I'm actually spending my time doing. You can do this in a number of different ways. Some people track their time very closely for a whole week. They literally write down when they get up to go to the bathroom, when they get distracted and go on Facebook, when they sit down and record their podcast, how long it takes them to do their newsletter, etc., etc., etc. I think that is a great method for you to really understand how long things take and what you're actually doing with your day on a regular basis. Another thing I like to do is to sit down and write out all of my commitments. Now, I get very granular with this activity. I write down every client I'm committed to, any family things I have coming up, friends I want to get together with, self-care, meetings, upcoming events, workshops, date nights with my spouse, like all of it. I dump all of it out, everything that I have committed to. And I might do like 2 or 3 months at a time, okay? As this relates to your social media and your marketing and your visibility, you can do this too. You can do it specific to that area. Like, what are you speaking at or being a guest on? Where are you posting on a regular basis? Where are you engaging? Like, what groups are you in? What are you committed to? Emails, newsletters, podcasts, weekly lives, etc. You can do this with just your content, and it's a really good experiment with just that. My husband and I did this last week with his stuff. We sat down and he made a list. Like, he basically dictated and I made the list because I love to make lists. And he included his weekly tasks, monthly tasks, bi-weekly, yearly projects he has going on right now, people he has to call, appointments he has to make, all of it. So this is what I'm talking about. And if you're experiencing overwhelm or struggling to know, like, what should I prioritize, I really think that this is the place to begin. Like, the worst way through overwhelm, oh my God, the worst way through is just going through it blurry minded or blurry eyed or in reaction mode, right? But I love to go through it with a clear head, knowing what you have to actually deal with. A calm mind, step by step, brings you back to balance. That's the only way through overwhelm, is step by step. And I think that this brain dump list, whatever you want to call it, give it a fancy name if you want, but this brain dump list, that's what I like to call it, it can help get you there. So once you have your list, you're looking at it and you're like, oh my God, there is so much on this list. You're going to check in on your values. Like, does this match up with what I value and my goals? Does this match up with what I want my life to look like, what I want to be known for, okay? And what I actually do in my business. This is so important. Sometimes the answer is no. I've been here where I've looked at something and I'm like, oh my God, this has nothing to do with what I'm building in my business right now. Why did I say yes to this? Sometimes I've said yes to be a people pleaser. Sometimes I've said yes because I've been worried about what would happen if I said no. Sometimes it's just things that you have to do like once, but it's not going to be forever. And sometimes, honestly, between you and me, to be frank, you need to flip the script and create a reason that it's important to you because you have to do it. And it'll make it more enjoyable if you can flip that old script. I'm thinking like for that, like laundry, cleaning, dump trips. I don't know, anything you really loathe, if you put a value behind it in your life, it really does truly make it better. So ask yourself, as you're looking at your list, does this match up to what I value, what I'm striving for? I'm going to give you an example of something that was not a good fit, and I didn't put it on my list. Thank goodness I actually said no, but it's a good example of like, I don't want to be known for this, and this doesn't align with my goals at all for my business. It's a good example. So I got asked to pitch to a marketing conference locally, and it was one thing about it is it was aligned with one of my current goals, which is to speak more. So I filled out the application. Now, one instant drawback in this opportunity was the distance. I was going to have to get a hotel or like get up wicked early to get there in time, but it was a place that I don't usually go. Like, I don't network and meet a lot of people in this area, and I did know the organizer, so I went ahead and applied. Well, when she responded to my pitch, she was like, well, your topic's great, but she presented a different topic to me, a topic I don't feel like is really in my lane. It's not in my wheelhouse, if you will, and it's not something I really want to be known for or really have a good knowledge to be able to speak on. So I just replied and said pretty much exactly that. And don't you know, she pushed back a little bit and I pushed back again. And finally I said, you know what, I have to decline the opportunity. Now, I'm sure I could have whipped something up on the fly about this topic. I could have pretended that I knew what I was talking about. In fact, I'll tell you what it was. It was storytelling. But you know what? A lot of what I shared, it wouldn't be my own original thoughts. And I don't really have that much knowledge of like the ins and outs and arcs and ups and downs and all that jazz about storytelling. So my presentation would have probably just ended up being like maybe Nike's tagline, like, just do it. Storytelling, just do it. So anyway, the point of the story is when it comes to new opportunities, and also when it comes to things that are on your plate already, it can be helpful to go through them and ask yourself, like, why am I doing this? Is this aligned with my values and goals? And is this what I want to be known for, right? So this is like things that you're working on marketing in your business even. Like, are you marketing something that you're like, this isn't actually really where I want to be going? Because we can do that too. We can fall into that too. Content you're pressuring yourself to create, new groups, organizations you want to join. Take a good hard look. Be honest with yourself in considering, is what is on that list things that you really love and value? Now, there might be things that you can delegate to somebody else. There might be things that you will do later. And also, there might be things that you need to do more slowly, right? Pull back a little bit on, ease up on the gas. And then there are things that you might be able to part ways with altogether and just let them go. Let them go. This could be anything. It could be platforms you're posting to, places you're going, even people, you know? And if you can't let it go now, here's a thought. Don't say yes to it in the future. That's what I'm working on right now. Deadlines, cutoffs, because I like to honor my commitments. But what I'm working on is drawing a line in the sand and saying, you know what, in the future, that is no longer a yes. That is now a no. And sometimes I do this on like a whole scope kind of thing, like a whole big picture view of my life. And sometimes I just do it kind of on a monthly, like I said, couple months basis. That's where you can start. And, on the topic of brain dumps, that's just, like I said, what I call them. But when things start to feel swirly, shut down your computer. Close all those tabs, shut it all down, turn your phone over and make a brain dump. And at first it's just like this list of everything that is taking up space in your brain. For me, it's as small as like, I want to look up this book, or I want to watch a trailer for that TV show, or I want to sign up for that event, or I need to buy a present for this thing. If it's taking up my mental energy, it goes on the brain dump list. But after you dump it, you can't just leave it there. Like then you just have this like massive list, nothing's prioritized, everything's all over the place. So then you might, I would invite you to consider categorizing it or like kind of putting it into buckets, right? So some of you, your buckets might look like priorities. So it might be like, I need to do this now or soon. I need to do this next week. I need to do this the week after, blah, 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 blah. Mine look like, so my buckets are specific to copywriting client work, content creation, appointments and meetings, because appointments and meetings have prep and follow-up. And then I have a personal bucket, which also includes kind of like ideas. So sometimes I have a great idea for something and I'm like, it's not time to sit down and start working on that, dear Emily, but it goes into my little idea bucket. Okay. So there's a lot of things that doesn't need to be on our immediate radar, but it already starts taking up our mental space now. So that's why I like that idea section, because it's like it's like your shiny object catcher. Okay, it's like I'm going to prevent myself from going down lots of rabbit holes by just putting this here, and I can look at it when I'm ready and I have time. And with that, like with your brain dump, I really, really got to encourage the categories, because if you have those categorized, you can then see exactly where you need to focus your time and attention for like the different kind of compartments in your life. There's so many different ways to do this. We could talk about how it would work for your unique brain. But then from there, I personally put it into like my daily schedule. So I use what kind of calendar or daily schedule is the best, right? There is none. There is no calendar or project management tool that is the best. In fact, I'm going to include a link to my colleague, Joanne Krall's blog, where she talks about how to choose a project management software that's right for you. I don't use one digitally. I use all the Google tools like Docs, spreadsheets, Google Calendar. I use a client portal, but I don't use like even the automations in my client portal. Like for me, I need to use a good old-fashioned, this is going to sound so old school, but I just use a paper planner, because when things are digital, they sort of fall out of my brain. Even that brain dump, I will type it, but then I will print it so that I can actually see it, because when I can see something, it stays like in my awareness and it also stays in my brain. So I take my brain dump sheet and I transfer it into my paper planner and sort of like write out. That's like how I create like a task list for each day. And let me just tell you, last Thursday, I sat down and I gave myself like a 7 task list. It was way too many. I mean, I think that they say 3 is like the sweet spot, but I don't know. For big projects, you really need to like be realistic with yourself on how many you can actually get done in a day. Because otherwise you just let yourself down at the end of the day when you're like, I put 7 tasks on my list and I only got done 2. Anyway, some people like color codings, project management tools. I think it could be great to take this little brain dump list and like sort of actually like book it into your Google Calendar if you use one. I think people can make these as fancy as they want, but really it's about transferring it from this list, from this organized list, into a place where you're actually going to sit down and have it as tasks to focus on. And I'm happy to give you like a super visual of this also if you're just like, I'm so confused. We're going to shift gears though. So another way to befriend your time is to kind of work backwards. Now, probably none of us are lucky enough some of you maybe, but you probably can't clear your calendar for an entire week and just like start living out your perfect schedule tomorrow, because you probably have things booked well in advance or in the future, like for at least a month. Okay. But here's what you can do as a small step. And this is what I'm working on too. Hand raised right here with you. I start determining how I would like a week to go. So I really sit down and think about, okay, how do I want Mondays to go? How do I want Tuesdays to go? How do I want Wednesdays to go? What do I want to be doing on each and every single one of these days? Do you need a self-care day? Which day is best for you for self-care? Do you need a head down, no interruptions, no calls day? Which one is it? Do you need a marketing day? It's like choose your own adventure for your week, right? But then you start working your way backwards. All right, so I need a content creation day, and I also need a CEO day to focus on my business. And I like doing that on Fridays. Personally, I feel the most inspired, excited, energized, engaged on Fridays. So henceforth, so I'd choose a line in the sand, right? Like maybe I am booked out the next 9 Fridays, which I can look at my calendar easily and see that I am probably a little bit more than 9 of them. So I know at that point, I need to no longer book things on Fridays. So I'm now working my way backwards, right? Okay, I put a line in the sand, I say stop the presses, and from X date forward, there are no more Friday things added, or no more Friday things of this nature added. Does that make sense? So you can do this with any day of the week. Now, I like to theme my days. I think it's helpful to say like, well, let me give you some context because I want you to be able to make this decision for yourself. So I do all of my calls in one day, or as many of my calls as possible in one day. I do client work that is like head down and focused on several days of the week. And I don't like to combine them. I don't like to have calls and like head down work in the same day. I'm the kind of person that can do 5 or 6 calls or podcast interviews or like whatever. I can do it in a day if I need to. I know not everybody is like this. What I have a hard time doing is task hopping. So like turning on and being social when I'm simultaneously trying to be thoughtful and creative and like sit down and do work. You have to ask yourself what works for you. I've heard people that need to space out their calls throughout the week so that they do not end up a puddle on the floor at the end of a Thursday. Or they like to have them all in one day so that they can Warrior Wednesday their way through like I do. You can also theme out days for like, okay, this is my self-care day. I have a friend that does that. She creates a specific day that is focused on her self-care. And you know what the magic of that is? If something comes up and sort of like she has to take care of around her house, she has the time and space to be able to do that. You can theme things out for your house, your personal errands, your networking, your do not book days. Oh my gosh, please, if you do not have any do not book days in your calendar, add them. If you learn one thing from today's episode, it's add do not book days to your calendar. So ask yourself like how you really want your week to look. And then getting a little bit more small scale here, how do you work best? Like how does your time block work best? I could really, really do a deep dive here, but it's basically just asking yourself like, if you like something shorter, like some people work really well with these short 20 to 25 minute sprints. There's a specific method called the Pomodoro method, and that is those 20, 25 minute sprints. Some people need a long morning routine. Some people like to work first and then do their morning routine. I personally am allergic to the word sprint. In fact, all of my days of running long distance, I could do like 13, 15, 17 miles, like barely break a sweat. The day I signed up for a sprint 5K, I legit peed myself. I think that's kind of a common thing with runners, but it wasn't common for me. It had never happened to me before. So there you have it. I am not a sprinter, but some people are. And I also heard this recently, and I love this. It helps some people stay interested in the tasks that they're doing in a day. And what I mean by this is my friend Lisa Zarotny, she brought this up in her recent episode of Positively Living. It's a podcast that she has specifically speaking to multiple multi-passionates and time management and productivity for multi-passionates. She was saying how a lot of multi-passionates have a hard time staying interested in one task for an extended period of time. So when I talk about like my 6-hour marathons, that sounds like hell on earth to them. Cue the sprints. Lisa gives lots of information and practical advice for multi-passionates, so I'm going to make sure I include that link in the show notes. But here's the end game here, okay? Once you find out how you like to work those time blocks, I really do encourage you to put those tasks from your brain dump, put it all together with this, like, how do I really want my week to look? And like time block your time. Like, make a plan for it, sit down and set out those specific tasks into the days that you planned to focus on them. I think that when you do, you'll be well on your way to befriending your time, and you will feel so much more productive because you literally just gave yourself the roadmap for how you want to spend your time. Now, I know a couple of you are probably like, well, I just can't stop getting distracted in my day. So this time befriendment strategy is lovely and all, but I just have so many distractions. I know that what I am saying is easier said than done. It's a habit. It is a practice. It is a muscle you can strengthen. I'm not going to talk a ton about like normal distractions. And when I say normal, I mean like the shiny objects, Instagram rabbit holes, songs you decide you want to look up the lyrics to when you hear them on Spotify, creating a playlist for your next camping trip. But I do want to talk about a couple big distractions that can get super duper in our way as business owners. And that is people pleasing. That is a huge distraction. Perfectionism. That is a huge distraction. And I even think that to some extent, this feeling that somehow one of these days, we're going to be able to get to the bottom of our lists if we just keep going. That is also a distraction. My friend, there is no bottom to the pile. It's a never-ending cycle, and that's okay. You will never accomplish it all. In fact, the moment you take something away is the moment something new gets added to your plate. And I love how my friend Crystal Nurple said this. She said it in a Facebook comment. She's like, in the long run, none of it even matters. The projects, the chores, the goals, they're all set and made up by me. I'm the only one putting pressure on myself to do them and get them done on any certain time frame. Yep. And we're going to get into this more at the very end, but it's true. And that is why when we're focusing on the things that give our lives meaning, and when we have a real reason behind what we're doing, and we're not just checking boxes to check boxes, that's when we really start to be friends with our time, live our best life. And we're not at war with every single moment trying to like squeeze it dry and get to the bottom of that to-do list. There is no bottom. People pleasing, that's another distraction, and it can come in so many forms. But basically, I'm thinking of like saying yes to things just because of someone else's pressure, whether that's real or imagined, someone else's perception, their feelings, whatever. And then perfectionism is another huge distraction. How many of you have sat down in front of something for way too long because if you just give it another hour, you can get it perfect? Last week, my podcast episode was not like, I was listening back and I was like, oh my God, I made so many mistakes. And you know what? The sad thing is I spent way too much time doing it because I redid it and then I sat down and tried to fix it. And my point is that perfectionism, first of all, it didn't even get me anything that was perfect, which is sad. That is sad. But second of all, it wasted a lot of my time. I could have just gone with what I had originally, to be honest with you. So a couple more things I would add to this list are procrastination. That's a distraction. And then, of course, the shiny objects, which include the pings, the bings, the notifications, incessantly checking your email. What would happen? I really want you to think about this. What would happen if you put a time block in place and then you put your phone in Do Not Disturb? You closed every tab except for the tabs that are involved in the things you're working on, and you turned your phone upside down. What would happen? I know that for some of you, you might need like your school and your spouse to be able to get through, but here's a little trick. Do Not Disturb has settings for that. Try it. It feels really, really good. And if your husband or the school needs to contact you, they can. And here's another thing to remember. You don't need an excuse as to why you were in Do Not Disturb. You don't need to say, I was on a Zoom call or crazy day or any of that. You can just be in Do Not Disturb. I think as entrepreneurs, a lot of people see our time, and I think sometimes we see our time as sort of loose, flexible, giveawayable. My brother, he's lovely. He's a great example. He thinks that my time is just whatever I want it to be. He constantly calls me in the middle of like a work day to just chat. And you know what? I'm really, really grateful that my little brother likes to call me. And I can't just stop everything that I'm doing every single day and just chit chat about like kind of just life stuff. Now, we can talk in the evenings. We can talk in the morning before I start my workday. We can talk on the weekends. So this is, like I said, zero offense to my brother. I love him. I want to be there for him. But often I don't answer his calls when I'm sitting down and trying to get work done. Now, people place this expectation on you. Just because you're an entrepreneur, you can drop anything. You drop everything. You're available anytime, right? You make your own schedule, so it's up to you. But that also means it's up to you to set that boundary when you want it and become distraction proof. So, what else can trip us up when we're trying to befriend our time? And then I'm going to bring us home to the finish line, I promise. There are a few things that people shared from my Facebook friends, the good people of Facebook, and also my husband, who was gracious enough to indulge me in this conversation prior to me mapping out this episode. Things that can trip us up. Underestimating how long things are going to take us. Now, this is going back to the beginning where I love that time tracking exercise. I do this with my client projects so that I can properly estimate my time when I'm giving people a proposal. I've spent weeks in my business tracking where my time was going and to what. We often underestimate that quick hop on Zoom, but it ends up actually being 3 hours because you know what? It's not just a quick hop on Zoom. It's also follow-up, it's prep, it's the actual call, it's the side tangents of the call, it's the interruption to your workday and now trying to get back on track with what you were doing. I'm not going to go on, but we often underestimate how long things can take us. So that's where I love that time tracking, and then you really watch where your time is going. Another way to befriend your time. The other thing that can trip us up is the inability to switch it off and to give ourselves that proper space and free time and recovery time and boredom time. If you are constantly feeling like you are in productivity mode, it's not going to be it's not efficient. It's not effective. And chances are, I can't speak to this from experience, but chances are you will like burn yourself out or exhaust yourself, but you're also not giving things like the best focus. You cannot always be working. So go read a book, take a walk, do a puzzle. I don't know, stare at the clouds. Sometimes I pretend my driveway is a beach and I stare at the clouds and try to figure out what the shapes they are. Back away from the desk and take a break. Next one, Jason brought this one up and I thought it was so good. Unforeseen snags. That is like when you start getting into a task, but then like something comes up and you realize you need like X, Y, and Z to keep on doing the task. That's why I love that brain dump document. That's why I love that list, because you have your priority A and your priority B list, or you have another thing that you can move on to if you do hit a snag. Your whole day is not ruined, right? The other thing we thought about for this particular issue is you could actually, like, next to the projects that you're working on, you could list out what you actually need, or you could list out the steps that you need to get it done. Now, I don't tend to do this. I tend to just sort of like it weirdly know the steps I need to do. It's very weird, but I see it being like really advantageous to like almost like a mini list, right? It's like, okay, here's my projects, and then here's the list under that project list. So I think it could be really, really advantageous and also help you to like like see through the problems before they become problems, right? Okay, last one. This one's big. This can trip you up. A lack of interest. A lack of interest in what you're doing or motivation around what you're doing it. And somebody replied this in a Facebook group, and she reached out to me afterwards and said, I am just not into it. Like, I'm not into what I'm doing. And so if that's something you're really dealing with, if you're like, I just do not want to do any of this, I would really ask yourself why. It might be that it's time to make a change in your services or your offerings or how you're approaching it. Or it might be something that you need to let go, So it's just something to look at. Like, really ask yourself why if something feels totally awful to you. Okie dokie. And I can't not refer to a resource I gave you in a previous episode. So the last way to befriend your time from here on forward is every time you are about to give it away to something new, every time you're about to add something new, you can just check in with yourself and ask these 4 questions. Do I want to do this? Do I have time to do this? Can I do this? And then, will I actually do this? And I will include the link to this episode where I go through each of these 4 questions and like how to really examine them for yourself. But it's super easy to just remember those. Do I want to do this? Do I have time to do this? Can I do this? Will I do this? Will I do this brings me to my last little point. And that is, in my opinion, this is like probably one of the more important ones. Keeping promises to yourself is a fantastic way to start becoming better friends with your time. Once you've decided what's important to you, once you have decided, okay, I am going to make time for the important stuff, the stuff that matters, it's really easy to give it away. Give that time that you committed to yourself to spend on your business or to spend on that client project or even on your self-care. It's really easy to give it away. So I would encourage you to start small and practice keeping those promises to yourself when it comes to your time commitments. And that will build a trust muscle within yourself that, yes, I am a person that follows through, even when the time is just something I set aside for myself to read a book. I used to break a lot of promises to myself when it came to my time. Honestly, I would block out a whole day to work on my business or to take a vacation. And then, you know what? I'd say, oh, something came up, and I would fill it with something else that was less important and less satisfactory to me just because I thought I should, or because I felt like I needed to always be productive, or because somebody asked me to and I didn't want to let them down. And then, you know what? I let myself down on the promise I'd made to myself, and I would beat myself up and blame myself on not having enough, quote, time. So that's where I really want us to begin. Befriending time starts with befriending ourselves, knowing that my time, your time, our time matters, and holding ourselves to what we set out to do. You are the one that gets to choose what you do with your time. You are the only one. And because of that, it's important to spend it in a way that really, really matters to you, because you matter and your time matters. All righty, that is it for today. Next week, we're going to talk about setting aside a day for content or marketing. It's going to be a CEO day with a content marketing twist. I know that 2024 is coming in hot, and we probably all have some things that we would like to accomplish next year in our businesses. So that's what we're talking about next week. And I want to be sure to invite you to join me in my upcoming Marketing Momentum Lab. We go through a lot of these time management strategies as it relates to your marketing, your creativity, your visibility, and a lot more. And the next group kicks off Monday, September 25th. I do not want you to miss it, so make sure you're registered by September 22nd, which is this Friday. We meet on Mondays for 6 weeks. So you'll get that dedicated day for your marketing on Mondays. The link is in the show notes, or you can also visit marketingmomentumlab.com. And if you have thoughts from today's episode, you know where to find me. I love hearing from you. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Content with Character. If you loved the episode, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast, rate, review, and share it with someone else you know it could help. For more content and visibility tips, visit my blog at emilyaborn.com and be sure to connect with me on Instagram at emilyaborn. I'd love to hear how this inspired you to take action.